And so when thinking about age as just one of the demographic factors that might influence kind of your approach to an audience, a way that we can see that in action is by comparing and contrasting two different speeches that are ostensibly about the same topic, which is bullying, but they're for very different audiences, both in terms of age, and you might see other ways in which the sort of assumed audience is different in each of these speeches, and how that affects what the message is, what kind of language gets used, the tone that's adopted, and so on. So I encourage you all to watch these speeches and think about this question of how the audience demographics, specifically age, makes for a different speech approach in each of them. Moving along, another area of demographics that we think about often in public speaking and in all kinds of communication is sex and gender. So just to clarify, sex is the sort of identification of the biological level of identity, and gender is what they call a sociocultural form of identification that's based on social norms of gender presentation. So how male and female as genders get constructed in a society are about how people tend to present themselves when they identify as male, female, or some other gender. So that's another one. Sexual orientation and identity, not the same as gender. So remember, sex is different than sexual orientation. Sexual orientation refers to the gender identity that your intimate partners, your romantic partners or sexual partners take. So who you're attracted to, essentially, or who you end up in, physical romantic relationships with. Our culture in the United States and North America in general is very heterosexual centric. I believe that heterosexual identifying people are, sort of a majority, but, nonetheless, we got to remember that we're probably, in talking to any audience, not talking to a group that's exclusively comprised of heterosexual people. Similarly, racial and ethnic identification, super important kind of area of social grouping. People tend to have, strong identification with, sort of racial and ethnic groups. Race is the kind of identification that's based on kind of like shared ancestry and physical traits. Ethnicity is usually understood to be more cultural or even kind of nation-based. So when you talk about ethnicity, sometimes you'll just hear people talking about people who from a particular country as being that kind of being their ethnicity, because ethnicity has to do with language and sort of cultural norms from people with a shared background that are not necessarily racially similar. And so U.S. audiences tend to be racially and ethnically diverse. Again, important to keep in mind when you're preparing a speech. Think about, okay, the people who are going to be receiving this are not going to be all the same race or all the same ethnicity. How might I need to take that into account in framing my message? And then finally, just other things here like socioeconomic status, group memberships that aren't, any of the ones that I said before. If you're talking to a group of really rich people, it might be different than if you're talking to a group of people who are, sort of more working class or, struggling to get by, people with different educational backgrounds, not simply in terms of, the kind of stuff you can talk about, but in terms of, again, what they're likely to see as important, what, they're likely to think about you if you have a particular educational background potentially, and then these other kinds of group memberships that this is the moral of this unit really is just make sure you're mindful and aware of the fact that all of these different demographic characteristics could play a role in determining how somebody in your audience hears what it is that you have to say.